such a wonderful pleasure to see familiar faces, people who've been coming back to these conversations since the beginning of the week. We are engaging with the question of these things that sit with us. It's a theme that we've given for these critical conversations, and it's drawn from this book. These are the things that sit with us. And the title is from one of the stories that are in the book. The stories were collected from Langa, Bontehavel, and Worcester. And they are stories by people who experience apartheid, who live through apartheid. And the stories are their reflections on what it means to carry these memories of this historical trauma that is apartheid. We have this morning two representatives of these stories, two people whose stories are in this book. On my left, we have Tembeka Toleni, who is a mother with her daughter, Thandi Gqiba. And on my right-hand side, we have Russell Cupido and his daughter, Rebekah Cupido, who is the second generation. We thought that this idea of bringing these young people will really help us understand how these experiences of pain and suffering under a system such as apartheid are represented in the lives of the younger generation. So I am really very pleased that you were able to join us today. And what I want to do, I really want, as part of the way of sharing with the audience who they are, rather than have me introduce you, I would like part of the conversation to be about you and the way that you want to tell the audience who you are. And in doing that, I would like you not only to say what you're doing professionally or in terms of work-related engagement, but just in terms of who you are as a South African at this phase, at this political time in South Africa, to reflect on that as you share who you are. So that's what how I'd like to approach the idea of introducing you. A little bit more about this book later. Before I ask our participants to share with us who they are, I want to mention two people in the audience who are relevant for us in this conversation. One is Lireko Qhobela, who is our PhD student in historical trauma and transformation. Lireko's PhD is in drama, and she will be reading as we move along, and she will lead us in an artistic kind of reflection at the end of our conversation. And the second person, who's not really on the program, but because of the kind of conversation we're having today, is Dorothy Carlotta, who is in the audience. And Dorothy is the daughter of Fort Carlotta. And again, she is part of this next generation, the generation of younger people whose parents were affected by the experiences of apartheid. I also want to mention that this book is co-edited by colleagues in our unit, Marietjie Oelofsen, who played a leading role really in putting this together, in coordinating this project in just a wonderful way. And so she's a co-editor of the book with me and a friend and colleague of ours, Friederike Bubenzer, at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. And this is a project that has been part of our research in historical trauma and transformation, just looking at the idea of what happens when, what remains after these traumas, what remains first in the lives of people who were directly affected by it, and then most importantly, in the lives of the generation of descendants who, as we know, are often the carriers of these memories. How do these memories play out? How do these experiences play out? It's really our effort to interrogate this concept that is known as transgenerational transmission of trauma, to understand how does it manifest in South Africa? How do we see it? How do we play out? And so we are very pleased that we have you, and welcome, we have you this morning to lead us in that conversation, and you as the audience. So thank you very much. So I want to start with you, Tembeka, and in part because I come from Langa as well, and lived in the same street, Brinton Street, as you did. And so there's an affinity in that sense. So I want to, and we are both women, we are mothers. And so I really would like to start with you. I'll come to the fathers as well in a moment. Yeah, but I really would like you to share with the audience whatever is on your heart in terms of who you are, and not so much about your story, because we'll come to that, but more, who are you today? You know, if you could just share with us that. Thank you.
Sorry. I'm Tembeka Toleni, born in Langa, age 73 this year. Born there, my grandparents were from Ndabeni, and my mother was born in Ndabeni. And I stayed in Langa for 77 years, 74 years. And I'm still there in Langa.
And could you just share a little bit, what are you doing now in Langa? You look wonderful as a 73-year-old, by the way. Yeah.
I'm in Langa. I am, through my mother's teachings, I training women. In fact, not women alone, women and young men. And sewing, I'm a chief instructor there. I'm doing that for 34 years. I'm in Gugasitebe, Sinako, Leadership, Sewing and Skills Development Center. That's where I am.
Gugasitebe is the big hall,
yes,
in Langa. It's a
Arts
cultural
center,
center, yes. Arts and cultural center.
I'm in a small a bungalow there, teaching women.
Great, thank you very much. So we come to you. Could you share with us who you are now in South Africa? How would you describe yourself?
Hi, I'm Russell Cupido. I was born in Worcester many, many moons ago. I'm 58 years old now. I'm involved in my community, not only in my community in Worcester, but also in the communities of Franschhoek and Paarl, where in partnership we really are looking to raise up a generation of leaders that can work on serious principles of justice, of giving people the space to actually become who they are. But yeah, I'm passionate about people in general. I really would like to see the best from all people and across all spheres of life, very actively in trying to get communities together and to have this conversation about our past, but also more importantly, a conversation about what our future should look like. Saying that at the moment politically, I'm very frustrated because I don't really see a very bright light out there. So therefore, all these activities, in order to bring something about that will bring change, where all South Africans can just be South Africans.
It's amazing that both of you are involved in community work. Isn't that amazing? So, Rebekah, tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Rebekah Cupido. I'm only 19, so I haven't lived as long as these ladies and gentlemen alongside me. I've just finished matric, so I'm looking to go and study overseas in Dublin, in Ireland. So I've applied to a university there. At the moment, I'm just working at a local cafe in Worcester, and reconnecting with my family as I've been away at boarding, so it does change the family dynamic a bit. I'm being away from Monday to Friday, so it's been nice to be back and learn to know my family a bit better, even though it sounds strange that I've been there all along. And yeah, just learning from my parents what they're doing and having these discussions and conversations with them and all that.
That's fascinating, the idea that you are learning again to relate to your family because you're away. You almost like an adjustment constantly, right? Interesting. Yes, Thandi.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Thandi Gqiba. I am the last born of Tembeka. I'm a mother of 2 girls. I'm passionate about change your life. We don't have to do it in big scale, but in small scales. I mean, if you are able to wake up every day, that's a privilege. If you are able to go out every day, because young people are depressed in what they see and what's happening around them. So if, you know, we try every day to communicate this thing of healing. Healing is I think it's very important for our parents as well, for us as well. The generation of myself where you still do not see much change, but there's little change, but there's not much change because 28 years, 25 years down the line, and we are still trying to bring about change to young people, to say to them, get up. It's okay not to know, but get up. So I'm an activist. I'm a musician. I'm into business.
As I'm listening to you, you are listing you know, a number of challenges that we face, and you alluded to this when you said that you're not happy with the politics. And it's interesting to hear that, and so I wonder, you know, we want to come back to that, but there's this voice that I'm hearing from what you're sharing with us, that there's something about suffering in the present. Am I right to kind of summarize it?
Yeah.
And so if you know, as the next generation, as the daughter of your mother, you have experience and witness and you are engaging with this issue of suffering. Can you share with us what is your story, you know, having been brought up under apartheid? You shared with us your story and more about that in a moment, but I would like you now to kind of connect what your daughter is sharing with us about what is happening now, today, and how that connects with your own experiences under apartheid.
I am so still heartbroken about what is happening around me. I've said first time that I'm working for Sinako. We are trying to put people, women, to be self-reliant by doing the sewing, selling the things, even men, even young men. And she has said that they are busy working with young men and young women in Langa. I always see them going in and out having meetings of what is happening in Langa. And it saddens me that at this hour, this time, we are still suffering. We are still having heartaches, headaches of the apartheid. Young boys and young men are not working. There are no jobs for them. We are trying to put them together and try to talk to the government by going to the councillors, and we are still heart aching. I was born in Langa with my grandmother and grandfather. My mother was working. We used to see every Wednesdays, I would say, young men with small cases from, the station was near my place in Brenton then. They used to come with their small cases, going to the hall. We used to follow them because we were young kids. We saw them being put online like ox, being dipped. They would take off their hats, take off their jackets, take off everything, and they would go there. And they would come, and the poured with, they called it the DDT powder. We used to sing songs for them. And then when I asked my grandfather, what is happening there? And he would be very cross with me. He said, you must never go there. And we used to sing. We used to sing. Here comes the people from the country, from the rural areas. They are being dipped like, and then we sing. My grandfather used to be very, very cross with me. But I didn't know what was happening. Man, it was a very sad, and I grew up in that. Even in trains, in buses, you couldn't just go into a bus and you'll see a line, a black line, that shows you that a black man will come to the bus and stops there, not further. And you'll see that the seats, most of the seats will be empty. And there will be kids, white kids sitting there. You can't sit there being black. Or sometimes the bus will just pass you. You want to go to town, you want to go to work, but you cannot ride that bus because it is restricted. You cannot go through there. There's a black line. Even in the pavements. If you walk in the pavements in town, Plain Street, Parliament Street, you cannot just walk when the white man with the kids is coming. You must move, whether it's raining or whether there's a car coming, you must move. Let them go through. You can't say a thing, you'll hear a big clap from the father. So we knew automatically, move away. The white people are coming. I grew up in that.
Tembeka, you've described this process of dipping, where men coming from the rural areas are coming to work, and this deep sense of humiliation of being, stripped naked to go through this dipping system, to almost like a ritual of cleansing.
Of cleansing, yes.
That they must be clean before they enter the city. Is that the right? Is that
yes,
portraying this
that
correct?
is what was happening.
Now, that sense of humiliation, I wonder what you could share with us from your own memory of that sense of humiliation, and maybe if you could speak about what remains after all that.
There's one particular incident that, in terms of the humiliation, stand out for me. I was very keen on athletics. Many kilograms ago, I was like really thin and I could run really fast. That was one aspect. I still tease the boys in my town that you couldn't run the times that I ran 40 years ago. You can't even get to them today with all this modern stuff. But nonetheless, a very well-known Springbok athlete by the name of Andries Krogman came to Worcester. He worked at the Dross Day, then Technical High School, and we were very enthusiastic to learn about athletics and running so that we could become also superstars in our own right, which regrettably never happened, but probably for a good reason. We didn't work hard enough. And one day, 3 of us took the courage. And we went to him and asked him, literally, listen, please, man, we would really like to improve our times. You the SA champ in 10K at that time. Could you give us some pointers? And he literally turned around and basically just said, ek help jou wat not sê. That really sort of broke the spirit. And that to me was one of the things that remains with me. I do not carry anger. I'm still very involved with athletics, and I try and create situations for younger people, regardless of race, to actually reach the top. So I really work hard at creating that particular atmosphere. And then there's another incident that happened many years later. I worked at a place in Magalies, not in Magaliesburg, just outside of Krugersdorp. And very interestingly, I worked at a Christian campsite. I facilitate camps and working with young people, and I love that sort of stuff. But nonetheless, a very prominent South African politician, who I'm not going to name today, came to that site. And the director of that campsite at a particular time was a black gentleman with wonderful person, really a fantastic person. And we worked together as a team. This politician came and we had conversations and he spoke to me and he asked me basically this. Waar is jy vandaan? In Afrikaans. And I told him I come from the Western Cape and he turned around and he said to me, listen, julle boesies had nothing to do with the struggle. So daar's niks vir julle boesies in die Suid-Afrika nie. And that particular thing, that's why I say I'm very disappointed with the politics of the day. That particular thing told me as a person that I actually do not belong. Not that I took it to heart, because I truly believe I'm a South African and I have an absolute right to be here. But that's kind of hurt, and you sit back and you think, now how do I relate to the South Africa today, and what do I do to break down the prejudices on both sides? And it's just to go about to say, come on guys, let's get up, let's try again, and literally let's try again. You know, there's this old English joke that says, if you want to try skydiving and if you don't succeed the first time, well, that's the end of it. But I know we're not there, South Africans. We are resilient in the point where we will get up and try again and again and again.
You both, you Rebekah and Thandi, you've witnessed your parents. There have been moments, both of you, where the wonder is, have you seen these moments in your parents? You know, if you could start with you. Have you seen these moments? Have you heard them speak in this way? When was the first time, you know, for you when you actually realized what it meant for them to grow up under apartheid?
Well, both my parents are in an interracial relationship. So my mum is white, my dad is colored. So growing up, I was very protected and I lived in a bit of a bubble, and I sometimes feel I still do. Like, I didn't know that story, or both of those stories. And like, I think hearing from both of my parents that, you know, when they'd walk in the street and they'd be holding hands, they're in love and they're happy, and people would come up to them and curse them. And I don't think that's okay. You know, I obviously didn't grow up in apartheid. I'm quite a few years later. So for me, that was strange. Hearing that it's horrible to think about. So there's those stories. And then also, my mum had a son before meeting my dad, Daniel. And he is the son to my father. And like, we've never ever said, oh, Daniel's not my dad's son. But I remember, I think we were younger, and I don't actually remember it happening, but I've been told the story before, where Daniel came up to us and he was like, oh, you know, you're not white. And I was like, what? I'm not white. And my mom was like, so I was like, okay, well then what am I? And I'm technically classified as colored, and hearing that, I shouldn't have been upset, but I was. And my mom looked at me and she was like, is there something wrong with that? And I was like, no. And she asked me, does it matter? And I was like, no, it doesn't matter. But often things like that you don't realize affect you, but it's kind of weird. Like, why do I have to be classified in these racial boxes? Because that has really got nothing to do with my personality, and at home we don't discuss race. Or we obviously have these conversations, but we don't discuss, oh, you know, you can't do that because you're white, and you can't say that because you're black, or you can't say that because you're colored. We don't acknowledge that, because I think sometimes it's maybe important to not always bring it up, because for children like myself, I mean, I get very upset when I hear those stories and other stories that I've heard, and also to compare how my mom felt during apartheid and how my dad felt. Like, my mom obviously grew up in a white household. Her father was in the Navy, and they went to an English school, and English communities were generally a bit more liberal. And her sister once came home with a black sash pamphlet. And her dad, when my mom's dad lost it, he was so upset, because in those days you couldn't have stuff like that. He'd be prosecuted and he'd get in trouble. And now to think that, you know, me having something, if I have a book or something like that, having that could get one of my families in trouble is a strange thing to think about and to understand. And so, yeah, I do get quite upset having to relive and hear those stories, because I have lived quite a protected life. I know families do carry pain, your emotions do carry on in your lineage, and I would say that maybe not consciously I feel it, but subconsciously, like I get emotional when he speaks about it, and I see him get emotional, or when my mom is upset, I see her, and I also feel, I'm quite an emotional person, so I feel that pain for them as well, and so it's not a nice feeling to have, because you'd rather carry the happiness and the joy that they've experienced than the pain and the sadness, but unfortunately that is the emotion that's more prevalent.
My grandmother was much into the struggle. So my household was a yayindawo yodlalela amabhulu. You know, when I knew from the age of 6 that kandibona ihagu, we used to call them ihagu, ezamoto zamabhulu, zamajoni. They're going to my house, no doubt. They would be on top of the house, in the street. My grandmother was fearless. They would come in, kick the door, and look for my uncle who had gone to exile. And manhandle my grandmother. And she would not budge. She would lift up her fist in the air and stand in the street and shout. And the stories that she would tell me, you know, and the pain that she went through when she was pregnant with my uncle, jailed, highly pregnant. She almost gave birth in prison. And I look at my life now, where just in December, when we went to Sea Point, we wanted to have lunch, and we couldn't book a restaurant because apparently we don't fit the color. You don't just go in and you know, and go and sit. You have to be a certain color to get reservations. And I stopped myself when I was about to react. And I said, let's turn back. As we were going down, trying to communicate with a friend of mine, and I saw my high school friend I used to go to Gardens Commercial with. She was with her family, and I said to her, have you booked? And she said, no, it's festive season, so we just restaurant hopping. And I said to her, I'll follow you. In fact, I won't follow you. I want to see if you are going to get a booking, because we didn't. And she couldn't understand. She was like, what do you mean? This restaurant is not full. I said to her, no, just go in. We'll follow you when you know, she went in. She was not asked if she had booked. She was not asked if you have done any reservation. She went in, and I went straight to the lady and I asked her, can we now go in? She said, no, I've just informed you that you did not do any reservations. I said, but this friend of mine just went in. You didn't ask her if she had done any reservations. Pitch black, she turned gray. And I said to her, is this the rule that you are being told to say to only to black people, or is it just a rule that black people do not go into this restaurant? And this was happening years ago, but we continue to be faced with this reality in the Western Cape. Years later. So the pain that sits with us continue to sit with us in a different generation. So when do we change the status? When do we change? When do we say we are fully liberated and in a democratic country? When do we say that? What happened to reconciliation? Because if reconciliation happened and we continue to be faced with racism, was there reconciliation? If my daughter, who's now 19, who is studying political science because of wanting to understand what is it with politics, what is it with me being a black child who's a total now a 19-year-old, born in 2000, still faced with now it's a transferred pain, because I'm feeling the pain, and the very same pain that sat with my mother, I'm transferring it to this generation. So is she going to transfer it to her children? I mean, when do we say we are fully free?
And it's what's really what you're sharing with us shows us that it's not there is the transfer of the pain, but there's also the immediate experience of the moment, that it's contemporary. It's not only transfer, it's also, I mean, the stories that you are sharing is something that you're experiencing now. And so this is the importance of your question, when is it going to change? It's a critical, crucial question about our current moment. When is that going? Why is it that your 19-year-old, granddaughter, the great-granddaughter of your mother, why are they still fighting the same issues? I want to show you the book and their stories. This is Tembeka, and this is a photo. This is a book that we decided to publish the book, short stories, excerpts of their narratives, with photographs of each of the storytellers across all of these 3 areas where we did our research. And in it, people choose what they want to include. So Tembeka included a photo of her and the story about her mother, the grandmother of Thandi, the great-grandmother of what's your daughter? Melanie. So, I mean, isn't this amazing that the narrative remains the same from this generation to her granddaughter, the great-granddaughter of this woman who was a fighter, in the way that Thandeka so poignantly described. And then Russell's, this is his portrait. They are beautiful portraits. We're going to have an exhibition of these portraits soon in August. This is his portrait, and his story comes with it. Each of the stories is written in the language, original language that the interview was conducted, and translations in the 2 other languages. If the person told the story in Afrikaans, there's translations in Xhosa and English. For us, this was a way of decolonizing, as you would say, decolonizing publication, the way that you publish stories. And Russell chose, there's a story around this church. I just want to show you. He chose this picture of the church, which has had an enduring impact for him, the church that is part of the story. So I'm going to invite you, Lireko, to come forward, please, with a microphone, or I give you my microphone.
So I'll be reading Tembeka's story first. Painful things happened to people here in Langa. I was born in Brinston Street in Langa. Apparently, my grandfather was among those who built these houses here in Langa. My mother was too much into politics. We didn't know about the meetings she was attending. She continued fighting and not earning money even though we were poor. She would say, "My children, it will be all right. It gets like this, but it will be all right." Our house would be raided by the Boers. We would cry and it would be painful. She would be manhandled and put in the van. We wouldn't even know which jail she was going to be thrown in. We would search for her with her comrades. There were a lot of painful things happening to people here in Langa. My mother fought against them, like the dipping. Men came from the rural Eastern Cape to work in the city. Men who came from the rural Eastern Cape to work in the city had come with what do they call that thing? Ijoyini. There was a hall with a big passage. The men were dipped there. We were peeking as children. They looked like cows in a dip. The men would open their suitcases and they would have something poured on them. I don't know if it was DDT, but something was poured on them so that they don't bring diseases. They were dipped. That is what was done to them. The men walked down in rows like cows waiting to be dipped. The women would be standing, watching, singing. The song went, there is Langa on a Wednesday. There in Langa on a Wednesday, the migrants are dipped. And in went Mbombela. The fathers are dipped. Apartheid oppressed us. It was difficult. You'd be walking in town and you'd see a white person approaching with their children. Without them prompting you, you would go and walk off the pavement, even if it meant being crushed by a car, because they will shove you and push you and you can't retaliate. Or you would pass by a restaurant and wish to eat there or drink coffee there, but you couldn't. So I'll be reading Dr. Russell's story. In their minds, our love was an abomination. In Worcester, I met this particular girl, a Boer Meisie, from here. We met at the church we attended. We attended the same cell group, and over time we realized there was an attraction between us. We eventually made the decision to go out together. For a while, we kept it under wraps, but we knew we had to come out at some point. Then all hell broke loose. Although we were in a fellowship where it was accepted that race does not matter, they could not get their heads around the fact that there is a white girl and a person of color mixed up. I was about 32 years old. We were very serious about taking the next step and getting married and settling down. The first resistance came from people that you thought you were closest to, family. The first time she took me home to introduce me to her parents, they nearly had a heart attack. But we decided to stay together for a period. Even from my family and friends, there was resistance. How can you do this? Somebody in my cell group even asked me what I was trying to prove. Eventually, it came to a head. It was too hard. She decided that this was not going to work, and she broke it off. I feel that it was never really resolved properly. It was hard to break up. The experience taught me a lot about Worcester at the time. That Worcester was not ready to accept people who thought differently. Nobody said to us, go for it. It was tough. I actually don't think, even today, that I have truly worked through this. Not just that I was in love and lost that love, but that society was against something that in my mind was so beautiful, but in their minds, it was an abomination.
Thank you very much, Lireko. There's a conversation among ourselves and elsewhere that across these histories of trauma, parents find it difficult to talk to their children about their experiences. Can you respond to that from your own perspective? The two of you, I'm gonna ask you to respond to that. Yeah.
Yes, it is a difficult conversations to have, but my wife Michelle is what she calls herself. I like to see communicates all the time, so there's a lot of talk happening, and she encourages discussion, and you need to discuss something. I tend to, when there's any sort of thing uncomfortable, not to share it, but she really pushes me to share the stuff. So like Rebekah alluded to earlier on, in our family we talk a lot about the current issues of the day and about the past. So simply because I think we've learned over time that discussing stuff brings healing, and once you suppress it, it actually explodes. I find myself often really getting angry about all sorts of stuff. As I said, I work in the community, and you walk into a situation that is particularly unjust, or a child has missed an opportunity or something like that, and I come home, and often Michelle says, but you come and taking it out on me now. So I have to learn to actually express it. Although it is difficult, I think that kind of behavior change has to happen. And it's very deliberate that you have to start talking about the issues. If we do not, I think the lessons of the past will just keep on coming around, and we will never get out of the spiral of destruction that we have in South Africa. And we need to really put together I dare not say program, because it's got to be beyond the program. We need to change our thinking about who we are and why we're here, so that we can bring about the healing that you alluded to, working into the kids. A lot of the work that I do at the moment is actually just trying to facilitate that conversation. When you sit with a bunch of kids that actually have no prospect of a job, and you explain to them how a CV works and how an interview will run, and you try and instill hope, and you don't see that. So we need to have those different conversations that you're going to say, okay, let's make this different and make it work for each one. Yeah.
Thank you, Russell. I think in your family situation is slightly different, because in a way, Thandi experienced some of what you experienced. She was young, she witnessed it, but your granddaughter will probably be in the same boat as Rebekah. But what I want to pick up on is what you shared at the beginning of your presentation, which was your pain and hurt about what you are seeing among young people. Can you share with us what are the connections between what you're seeing young people experiencing today and what you saw during your childhood? Is there a connection? Is there something that connects these stories? Is there similarities in what young people are going through today? Is it worse? Is it different? Can you just share with us? You know, when we did this work, there were reflections among young people who spoke very much like you shared with us this morning. So what is it about what's going on now that reminds you of what happened in your life, in your childhood?
I don't see any anything that is better. If you can go to Langa now, you'll see a lot of them loitering, going up. If you ask one of them, why are you not at school? Why are you not somewhere where you can get a job? Said, we don't have jobs. And the result is we've got a lot of, what do you call them, tsotsies, breaking our houses, because they want jobs, they want money. And it is so sad, because one time our car was broken in. And I asked myself, if one of my kids went out at that time, what was going to happen to that young one? And I told myself, if I would wake up, I would stop my kids and say, I know what is happening with that boy, because he wants something. He wants food, or he wants to be recognized. And some of them, they've got degrees, but they are loitering around. There is no change, people. I don't see any change. Uthandi, my daughter, is busy with his young kids. He would come home, and I see this frustration on her face. And I wouldn't ask what is wrong. After a while, he would say, Mama, you know this and that is happening. This and we'll just sit down and cry sometimes. We don't know what to do. We are trying to make the change. But if there is a change, it is very slow. It is very, very slow. We don't see it.
Thank you,
know,
Tim. Go on.
You know, when my brother was 18 years when he went to exile. Mind you, he was not even educated that much. He was in standard 8. The one my mother was nearly gave birth in, there was a jail in Worcester. They called it Pendon. It was a new one. My mother and 3 other colleagues, they opened the jail. My daughter, my brother's daughter is also doing politics. He's graduating this weekend in politics. It's a recurring thing. that means to say we are just going to do politics. There is no change.
Because they're seeking an answer. They're seeking
They are
ways of
seeking an
understanding.
answer. They are looking for an answer.
Thank you, Themba. I'm going to invite the audience, and after a few questions, we'll have an intervention from Lireko and a closing. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Audrey. I'm from the West Coast, Fontaine, but I regarded it important to be here this morning. It is really for me a privilege. So first of all, I just want to thank you for sharing your painful stories. It really humbles me. It deeply touched me. And I just realized how important it is to listen to these stories and with compassion, compassionate listening, so that we can become more that powerful witnesses. But I also want to ask you, or let me say personally, I'm always looking for opportunities to listen to stories. And I think there's a lot of healing in, a lot of understanding. Also, it's a gift these days if someone can really be present to listen to you. Everyone is so busy and focused on his own things. But I want to ask you a question, what you would suggest, not on the political level, on this personal level. What do you think, or how do you want us to approach it? Because I think it's to encourage more meaningful connection, more meaningful dialogue, coming nearer to each other. Yes, because I still hear a lot of stereotypes out there. And yeah, I try my best to break it down. And then just the last thing, can I just say, Velda Jansen, with the book, I Kom in die Skoenlappers, she also said, but from their side, they also want to hear the stories when we were children and also under the apartheid, not realizing all that stuff. So I just want to know if you've got any suggestions. And then I want to say I have to leave early, not because I'm unrespectful, but I've got a next thing to attend. Thank you so much.
Let's take a second question.
I think mine is more of a comment around Langa. Uti understand good, okay, you are pointing out to say young people are disillusioned. Yeah. And I happen to be part of them as well, right? I happen to fall within that statistic. And I think for me, townships like Langa, I think there's a rich history in our townships, you know, that I think as young people, a lot of times, I think in whatever behavioral patterns that maybe we tend to exhibit, I think it's a call also for Indabaye history to say, what is the beauty of Langa? Because when I listen to jazz, and listen to artists from Langa, the story is there, you know? And I find, Guti, as you are saying, that there's a repetition of the cycle of disillusionment to say all people are wanting answers, like young people now wanting answers. Young people then were wanting answers. And I think there's that disengagement, you know, that is needed. There's that disengagement. And I think there's more need for engagement, you know, in our communities. Because I realize, Guti, it's not good young people. The thing is, there's a need for young people to get to know certain things. And I think even generations that came before us need to come closer as well, you know. Even now, like I'm reading stuff on Gibson Kent, and I realize much of what I'm reading are the steps that I took, you know, when, you know, I'm from Soweto, you know, whatever that is referenced in the book, these are places that I've been to, you know. And I think my wish would be that every other young person that is growing up, whether born free, whether, you know, to know that, you know, when you see Uncle Tom's Hall in Orlando West, it's not just a hall. You know, there's been stories that have been there. You know, when we see our uncles walking around with guitars and, you know, there's a story there. And I find those stories, they don't trickle down, unfortunately. You know, and I feel that disengagement is the source. And I feel there's still a space, you know, for young people like me to come into university, to also make the university also accessible to the nearest communities as well, to say, let's revive, you know, the beauty of our communities, the stories in our communities, there's been art in our communities, there's been theater in our communities. And I feel good, that's the engagement that we need. I know maybe there's been done, but I think there's room for that, more and more and more. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories. When I read the stories, listen to your stories and also the stories in the book, there's a sense of a lot that was sacrificed, a lot that was struggled for, the hope of the future, and then that future arriving and it looking very similar to the past. In that context, which is really hard and perhaps could create feelings of despair and disillusionment, where do you find hope? And I found something that you said really interesting, Russell, and I would love for you to speak more to it, because you said it's not in a program. We need to think deeper than a program. And then I also heard you saying when you work with the youth, it's like you're trying to get up, but there's a difficulty in getting up. And I'm just wondering, in this context that we sit with now, where can we find hope, and where can we find hope, and where do you find hope in your lives within this difficult context?
To be honest, those conversations are only recently starting, where we've realized that we are not speaking to the youth, we're speaking on top of them. So the older generation that comes before me has not taught this generation how to converse. So only now that we're starting to find our feet in terms of healing us as the black youth, I don't fall under youth, but us, the 70 generation, where we are saying we need healing ourselves so that we are able to have this conversation and to unlearn a lot of things as us, so that we start having a conversation that speaks to the youth and inform them of the history of Ulanga, the richness that Langa has. Because I always hear people from city of Cape Town, when they speak of Langa, they speak of gold. And you're thinking, you're speaking of gold, and you do not come to the people of this community. You come and take everything that you think Langa has, and you bring so much division in the people of this community. And now we're trying to bridge a gap between the generations, because first conversations starts at home with me. So a lot of homes do not have those conversations because we've got so many child-headed homes. So there's a lot that needs to happen when it comes to conversation and when it comes to healing as well. Because I believe that we are all en route. We are all becoming. So until we start getting to a point where we say, let's go deeper into who we are as human beings. Let's find it. Hope. I would really want it's my ideal situation where we get healing spaces even at school. We get to a point where our kids get to a point of healing. I think we will not live on hope. We will strive, because we are raising a generation of broken human beings. So until we get to a space where we make healing a priority at school, we bring the culture of arts into our schools, sport into our schools, we will not live on hope. We will get a generation of young people that strive. Not a generation that is despondent and angry and hopeful that things will change. We need a generation that strives.
Isn't it a fascinating distinction between, the hope and striving? That I find that really quite intriguing to think about. It's not hope, it's how you strive. I think we have to think about that, as well, just in terms of the tension between you know, it's almost like you sit and hope and then you strive, right? Yeah, it's fascinating, yes.
If I may say something, one of the most important things is for us to be able to tell our story and to speak out. In my case, it's brought a lot of healing, and it actually enabled me to open doors of passages that I didn't want to face in the past. So it's been a very good process. Very importantly, in this church that I referred to in the story, I spoke on a day. Now, this is the essential makeup of the church was a bunch of colored people, sort of middle-class colored people, and then you had a lot of people from the farming community in Worcester. You know, so you had a nice mix of people in terms of what there was. Regrettably, there was no black faces, so which is a lack. But I spoke one day on the need for us to respect each other at the point of where we are. And somebody reminded me, literally 3 weeks ago, due to ESCOM, we were sitting in the load shedding, we were sitting in a coffee shop in Worcester, and this very prominent businessman walked up to the table with my wife and I, we were sitting, and he came to talk, and we spoke about a whole lot of stuff on the journey that he's on currently. And then he mentioned the one thing, he said he came into this particular church, the hall the one day, and I was at the podium. He told his wife that he will get up there and then and leave. His wife forced him to sit down, great on the lady. So she forced him to sit down, and he said to me, you know, you spoke on respect, the need that we have to respect each other, whether a child, whether a grown person, and that we have to, you know, live it out. Not that we always manage to do that, but that we have to live it out. And I think in the political context of today, in the social and the cultural context, all of those things, we need to give each other the room to be who we are. When I speak about something that hurts and maybe I display a little bit of anger or stuff, please give me the room so that I can vent it without shutting me down or being uncomfortable. And I think when I talk about how do we change our mindsets and stuff, it comes down, and in fact, in Christianity, to me, it's one of the, when I talk about Christianity, to me, it's a very personal relationship with who I believe is my creator. It's not about the church and its liturgy or anything like that, or the order of service. It means nothing to me. It means my relationship with that particular being. So it's very important for me to say, because I was created, and a little bit about the Ubuntu here, as I was created as a human being with, and because I was created by that person, I have value. But it gives me absolutely no right to detract from somebody else and say that you are a lesser human being. One of the cruxes of apartheid is this whole story about what is race and what is ethnicity. The fact, she talks about the dipping story, that it was, it's beyond comprehension that another human being puts another person out there. It just goes beyond comprehension. So we need to stand down and literally say, even to the point of reconciliation and that person, your forebears hurt me, but I choose not to today to retaliate. I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'm going to open myself up so that we can actually pick up that thing. The young person has to say exactly the same to the older generation that probably has failed us. I often speak about the older colored folks, my parents' generation, and I said, in a sense, you failed us. But if we're going to keep on holding that against you, what are we going to do? We're really just going to bring about the cycle again, and we need to deliberately, very deliberately say, I choose to do things differently. If I can allude to the school that Rebekah went to, it's across the mountain, it's in the top 10 most expensive schools in the country. Rebekah is very smart, so she managed to win a scholarship. Otherwise, I couldn't afford to have her there. But their program, and they have people from all races, as we call it. I don't like to use that term, because I think it's absolutely degrading to call for us to be different in terms of race, but ethnicities, there's different nationalities, there's different social classes. But the faculty in that school do not tolerate anything outside that decency of treating another person with respect. In fact, in my experience with Rebekah, her faith grew because she was in a safe space where any person of any persuasion, they could have raised their opinion, and they was never rejected or never shouted down or nothing. people were given the room to be themselves. And I think generally in South Africa, whether you're young in Langa, I see the same things in Swellendam and Worcester. And Bokweni, I see the same things. You have the right to be heard. And I have the obligation as an older person to listen to you and give you that respect. I have to also be very deliberate in my action. I was very fortunate. I have a vast mixed bag of friends. And some of those people are related to some of the architects of apartheid. But we choose to have a friendship, and we choose to have a discussion with each other, and we choose to give each other the room to just be. And I think that's why I say let's move beyond the program. It's really just recognize each other's humanity and the value that each person has.
Thank you, Russell. So we have about 15 minutes, and there's just 2 more steps. So the first of those steps is a question from Dorothy. And then before you respond, you give the last word, each of you. You'll have a last word and a last song, perhaps. But you speak, Dorothy, and then we're going to invite Lireko to respond before the response from the stage. So Dorothy, please.
I can just really state that I'm very, very honored to be within your presence. To Thandi, it's like everything you were saying, it's more like a variation of my story. So much of it is so similar, even in terms of the ages, and having experienced and witnessed your grandmother going through all of that, and your mother. And so there's that identification with the privilege of having experienced these things. And they are not just stories that were transcended from one generation, but you've actually experienced them. And then also experiencing this hope for a new South Africa, and the democracy comes, and have experienced the disappointment from the hope and the aspirations that you've had as an individual. So there's a lot of identification there. But as everyone was speaking, my immediate feeling was also, even in terms of when you were responding, I had a question, almost maybe probably even a comment of saying, why all the rush? Why are we rushing to come to the next generation when, in fact, your generation hasn't even healed from the pain? And if I can just go back to, I think it's Russell Cupido set in my head, because there are lots of Cupidos in Credo. So, when there was a point there when you were talking. I think I've marked it earlier, but I'm not going to go back to it. I could actually experience your pain, and my immediate reaction was almost like catching that pain and saying, "Keep quiet. Let's stay there. Let's stick to the dehumanization that you felt." Oh yes, you were talking about the part where within the New South Africa you were told that you Bushies didn't have any contribution within the struggle. So, and when you were talking about the sense of not belonging, and immediately you have to move on to come to a point of understanding. And I think that is the problem. That is the current story for me that is a problem, is that within this process of talking about your stories, you must also find solutions for the next generation. So in a way, your story doesn't get heard and healed. You don't heal. And I'm probably thinking about this because I'm a healer. So I like staying with the moment, bringing it to the here and now, catching it, holding it, processing it, so that really when you move on, you have really moved on. So it's almost like I'm suggesting to say, yes, we need to have these intergenerational talks, but there also needs to be a recognition and an awareness that you also need to heal from the pain and the trauma that you, by the way, still carry. Because part of what you're transcending to the younger generation is also your pain, because you haven't dealt with it appropriately.
Thank you, Dorothy, for that contribution.
The morning begins. We are graced by the presence of the two greats and their descendants. I see a king and many queens on their thrones, a delicate air of pride. But before we head off, context. Langa, Worcester, women, community working towards principles of justice. Apartheid took a lot away from people, but we are here. We are South Africa. We will make the future bright again, and brighter than it is right now. But what is this? The future does speak. It reflects the work of its ancestors. It takes flight to new lands to expand. It stays rooted in the lands that nurtured them. It too inspires change, healing, growth. Get up, they say. It's okay to not feel okay, but get up. Where's the change? They say, the past has met a disillusioned future present. Memory throws us back to when we were children and our innocence was a saving grace. But time teaches us how to see the pain. We are divided. Yes, we are still divided. Pockets of memory throw us back to when we were lighter, and many kilograms ago, when speed took us and made us feel free. A retelling of times, of the good and the heavy. Our consciousness grows heavy from these memories. We cry. We mourn our identity ascribed to us. We loathe it. We love it. We are confused by it. Descendants echo on. Freedom! Baton, freedom! Why are we still here? Why do we live in the pain of the past when we can see when can we disrobe? When can we disrobe the forefathers' burden? Our children's parents and children, these conversations are difficult to have, but they need to be had. It's not easy because there's anger and there's pain, and there's anger and there's pain, and we spiral in this desperation to heal. And yet in the room, there's a cradling. Perspectives from other narratives. A meeting of two worlds. An acknowledgement of the beauty that still is. A reclaiming. An intelligent sense of hope. Finding the fabric of our humanity in the healing of our hearts. So that prosperity is the only thing that sits with us. Yay!
Thank you so much, Lireko. We'll invite Tandy to close with a song for us.
This is one of my grandmother's favorite songs. Tina sizwe, Tina sizwe, esimnya, sikhalela, sikhalela, izwele, elathathwa Oh, my
This song reminds me of 2 days before my mother dies. She called us. She never got ill. She was never hospitalized. 2 days after that, my mother died of heartache. And she called all the women and said, don't back up, you must carry on fighting. Take on the baton and fight till we are liberated. My mother died what year? 1987. And she was always saying, Mandela is coming. I can see the light. But she never saw Mandela. We did.
And what a great way to end the conversation. I would like you to have a last word, Russell, as our guest on these stories, if you could say after Tembeka, and then we close.
Dear to me is the fact that this was a little demonstration of the riches we have in South Africa and the talented people that we have in South Africa. And yes, in the past, a load of those people will never get an opportunity to be heard. And I think it is very important for us to take that forward. On one of the prominent farms in the Franschhoek Valley, I stood there the one day I arrived. I was waiting to meet up some friends to do a workshop. And there was this huge sense of loss that came over me. There were so many people that I just thought of, so many South Africans, that their stories will never be heard. We will have absolutely no recollection of what they are. They're dust, they're gone. They're just gone. But I think we have a major obligation to bring about the hope in this country and keep on speaking it, although it's very difficult at times to keep on and to keep on trying and to be able to hold those memories of people past very close to us. I like what the Jew says when somebody passed away, may his memory be a blessing. And may our people's memory be the blessing.
I do want you to say something because you represent this hope. A young girl identified because of her brightness. Opportunities are open for her. She's from South Africa, from this history that your dad has shared. Now you're going to Ireland. Isn't that all of the stories that our country carries? So I would like you to say something, and then we have a wonderful ending with all your voices. So please.
I just think it's very important as young people that we need to listen to our parents and not be scared to ask them about what happened. Because I think sometimes in various family arrangements, kids feel that they can't say anything. You know, kids are seen and not heard. And we may think that that's no longer the case, but unfortunately it is in certain families. And there may be people here who feel that they can't speak to their parents about certain things, or their parents will reject what they're saying, or they feel that they need to carry what their parents believe. And I'm very lucky that in my family I can have my own opinion, and I can disagree with my father, I can disagree respectfully with my mother. They don't begrudge me for it. You know, I don't have to worry about conforming to what they want, and I can take that through or with me through to Ireland or wherever I may be, and I can feel that I'm allowed to say something, and what I say has value, and sometimes I may not really know what I'm speaking about, but it's okay to have it, say it, and then someone else can tell me, oh, you know, Rebekah, maybe be more cautious when you say something like that, and change my identity, because I think you can't be stuck in one mindset forever. You have to conform because the world is changing faster than we can imagine. So yeah, I think that we just need to accept that we're allowed to think differently and be different, and we don't have to be scared to ask and say something.
Thank you very much to you all, and thanks to you, the audience, tonight, and thanks this afternoon, this morning. Thanks very much, Lireko, for your intervention and contribution. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Marietjie, I would like you to have the last word, please, about the rest of the week. And
No, I'm going to be very short. I just wanted to say that the book is available at the exclusive books tent if you are interested. And then tomorrow morning, Max de Prier will be in conversation with Rebekah Cupido and Nadia Lubowski. And on Friday morning, there will be a conversation with Candy's mama and Willem Verwoerd. And on Sunday morning, there will be a panel discussion after the showing of the film Morphe with the filmmaker Oliver Hermanus, with Jakub Barnard Nudia, with Pumla, Greg Latter, and Teresa Edelman will facilitate that conversation. Please come and bring everyone you know. Thank you.